Gursky with the state, or the governor's office. So you've kind of got the three of us, the three main agencies involved in the redeployment of to the ARPA funds. So I have a presentation prepared that we're gonna go through. The first part, Erica Legursky from the governor's office is gonna cover. Then it's gonna go in and it's just gonna provide an update how we ended up where we're at and what the situation is. Also, then I will go into some detail about the different dates that are floating around. October 1, October 31st, December 31st. We'll cover the differences related to those. And then finally, we will talk about the current plan of attack and how things are progressing. One thing I beg for all of you to keep in mind as we go through this process, every day, sometimes every minute, things are changing for us, and we will not know the full picture of everything until after the fact. We can't make any true, real funding decisions at this point in time related to the redeployment. We have to wait until after October for the redeployment decisions to be made, because we don't know how much money we have. And so those decisions will be made following October. Hopefully middle of October, we'll have a good knowledge of what's coming back. But it may be the end of October as we work through this process, because there are a lot of moving parts. So with that said, I believe Erica is still trying to join us. However, I will start the presentation and hopefully she will get on here really soon. Otherwise, you're gonna have to listen to my very boring voice, go over the stuff that she was gonna cover. All right. So this is what we know as of today. Things could change. Things are always changing. And so please bear that in mind that as we talk today, decisions could be being made elsewhere that we're not aware of that will impact numbers, process, something like that. So please keep that in mind. At first, I want to start by saying how we got here. During the 2024 legislative session, there was no standalone ARPA bill passed. Therefore, the ARPA information had to be included into the regular FY 25-26 budget. And I see Erica's joined us, so I will let her take over and cover this part. And then when she's done with her part, I'll take back over.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Okay, thanks. Sorry, I was having a hard time getting in. So just the conversation that they had was there was going to be a standalone bill during the 2024 legislative session. The standalone bill would reallocate some of those unobligated funds. That did not pass. So what we did do is they did add that to the governor's budget bill, section 341. It did allow the governor the flexibility to reappropriate those unobligated funds. You can see on the screen here, and I won't read all of that to you, but if you go look at section 341, it states that as on April 21st, the governor could start looking at those. We are having some meetings and looking at what we have allocated. There was a letter that had gone out on June 10th that kind of talked about a little bit about what we were going to do for those reallocations of funds. And we started working really closely with the budget department and OSLI to get the current funds done, and then the ones that we were going to reallocate on here. one of the things that we're really closely is that the governor has determined to use the last 2 months to redeploy those funds. So November and December, trying to get those funds really reallocated. But what we have to do then is to determine what funds have not been, that are unencumbered as of October 1st. My apologies, I am talking fast. I actually have to leave in like about 2 minutes to go staff the governor. So my apologies. We are looking at, and we can kind of go over this a couple of times. There are a couple of key dates that are on there that we have to have the funds. We have to know what funds are here by October 1st, what's being spent, what's under contract. Those that are not have to be brought back, and that we are going to reallocate those the last 2 months. We have to have everything allocated under contract by December 31st of 2024 in order to make some of those deadlines. And on here, it'll show that the working group is the budget department, OSLI, and the governor's office. So we do have some things that are identified as far as what categories those are going to fall under. Let's see, I see some things popping up on the chat. And I can have the conversation about under contract. I will have OSLI and the state budget department talk about that, because I think we are kind of interchangeably using under contract and obligated.
Yes, we are. And so I can kind of take over for now, Erica, if you want.
Okay, and my apologies, I'm going to step away, but I'll be back.
Okay. So during the legislative session, there was identified approximately $53.8 million available to be redeployed at that time. As of July 1, or July 31st, excuse me, there's approximately $11.8 million remaining to be redeployed. This information can be found on the budget's website, and there's the link to the website. They will keep this updated as things happen. This spreadsheet is also available on the governor's website as well as the state budget department's website. This is where that $53.8 million that we started with, where things have happened, and where we've ended up at $11.8 million. I do want to point out that a lot of the projects on here, the big money, are water projects where they supplanted or replaced water development funds with ARPA funds. Those projects that were originally funded through our office with ARPA funds and that now have matching water development funds, each of those projects will need to be handled individually, separately on an individual case. Each one of them, with the change in funding, it brought some different colors to the page that we're going to have to be working with. So we will be reaching out to each of you individually, gathering some additional information from you and working with the work group to figure out how to proceed with those. So the deadlines that we have, October 1. October 1 is the deadline the governor's office has set. And it's also the date that's set in the SLIB rules, chapter 40 through 42, for grant awardees to demonstrate that their ARPA funds have been obligated or are under contract. This is also the date for which the governor has decided that state agencies also need to have their contracts executed, so that we are having a big picture idea after October 1 of what funding hasn't been obligated and what funds are available to be reallocated or redeployed to existing projects. So while there's no specific definition of an obligated for these purposes or within our rules, for the purpose of these programs, we interpret obligated to mean that an entity has fully executed contracts, both your engineering and your construction contracts, that equal the SLIB approved amount if it's 100% ARPA ARPA funded, or is greater than the amount of the awarded funds if there's match funds included in there. So this is our way to be able to track what funds are obligated, which ones are not, as of that required October 1 date. So within all of our chapters, this is included in every chapter of ARPA rules that SLIP has approved. It states, any grant funding that has not been obligated by October 1, 2024 shall be deemed rejected by the recipient and shall revert to the office. All requests for reimbursements for eligible expenses must be received by the office no later than October 1. And then finally, any unused portions of grants awarded pursuant to these rules will revert to the U.S. Treasury on December 31st, 2026. So with this date, this is different than some of people's executed grant agreements. So the October 31st date, that is within executed grant agreements. And while that is within the grant agreements are established and pursuant to the rules. So the October 1 date still is in existence and still applies to these funds, especially with the initiative by the governor's office to have all funds encumbered, obligated, under contract, whichever word you want to use, by October 1, so that the state can get a full picture of which funds are available to be redeployed, so large amounts of money are not sent back to the federal government. So with the October 31 date and the October 1st date, we're able to work with our entities that are in the final stages of getting contracts executed. If you are just now bidding, you're just now trying to get your I's dotted and T's crossed so you can go out to bid, and that's happening at the beginning of October. Those instances we're not able to, we won't be able to work with entities because there's no certainty that those funds will be obligated, and there's no certainty that those funds will be spent. And so we're doing two things here. We're trying to make sure that the funds that have been awarded, we want to make sure that they're encumbered. And we're trying to make sure that the state is encumbering all the funds that they've received from the feds. But also, we're making sure that all of those funds are spent. Because if they're not spent between December or January 1, 2025 and December 31st, 2026, for the purpose that they were appropriated for and approved for before that December 2024 deadline, those funds will be returned to the federal government. So we're trying to prevent large amounts of money going back to the feds. We're trying to make sure that these funds are being put into projects that we know that will be completed within the required time frame. The difficulty that we have right now is that there are a lot of projects to be done, a lot of work out there to be done, but there is not the contractors, the engineers, or the workers to get it all completed and get contracts executed within the required time frame. This is something that was discussed at the beginning of this program. At any time that we've had a funding meeting, these things have been discussed about our concerns about projects being able to meet these deadlines. So if you need a couple weeks past October 1 to get things finalized, we're able to work with you. However, we're not able to go past the end of October to work with you on getting those funds encumbered. We will, as Erica said, we will be using those last 2 months to figure out how funds are going to be redeployed and where they're going to be. Because not only do we have to determine how or where they're going to be redeployed, we also have to ensure that we have fully executed grant agreements before the end of December 2024. Otherwise, those funds will just return to the federal government. I'm going to let Christine talk a little bit about the December 31st deadline, because that's the Treasury deadline, and she's much more intimately involved with that deadline.
Hey, thank you very much, Beth. Excellent conversation that we're having today. This is Christine Eminger from the State Budget Department, and December 31, 2024 is the federal obligation deadline that the state of Wyoming has to adhere to. That is why the governor's office has made a state deadline of October 1, 2024, so that we can recapture any unobligated, unexpended dollars and redeploy them to eligible uses. So for the purposes of the 3 ARPA programs administered through the State Loan and Investment Board, through the Office of State Lands and Investments, the state of Wyoming is still considered the recipient of those ARPA funds. And therefore, all of the contracts and grant agreements must be fully executed before the end of 24. And that is why we need you to go out and put pressure on your contractors to get those dollars obligated by October 1. We want to have this opportunity to make long-term investments in our state with these dollars. So create the pressure on your contractors to get these dollars obligated, get them contracted at your local government or your entity level, because if they are not contracted and you do not provide that evidence to the Office of the State Lands and Investments, we will have to go back and recapture those dollars. We don't want to do that. That would create a lot of problems for the locals, and especially for the projects that we have invested money in. And one other point is that there is not going to be an ARPA fund extension for the obligation deadline. We know that the federal government will not allow a deadline extension like they did for the CARES Act. And they have already had several discussions about the reversions that they will be recapturing from states to use to balance the budget. We want to make sure that we keep that money within the state of Wyoming boundaries and make sure that we make the investment in our communities.
Absolutely. So I'm going to stop right there and open it up for questions. We've just fed you a whole bunch, and I know the dates have caused quite a bit of confusion. So let me read some of the questions we have. How do we update the City of Rock Springs contacts associated with our award? Who do we need to reach out to with OSLI? You can send a email to the SLF-grants and loans at WIO email address and let us know that you need to change that contact information. And that goes for at any time. If you need to change contact information, you can use that email address. We were asked to slow down talking. I'm sorry, we all talk very fast, very busy people, and we apologize. So if there's something that we need to repeat, please put that in the chat, Alan, and I will be happy to repeat it. Austin says he can hear us loud and clear. Robin is asking, will we be able to obtain copies of the slides? Yes. So this webinar is being recorded. It will be available to rewatch or available to those people who weren't able to attend today. This webinar will be available as well as the slides. So you will be able to rewatch the webinar, print the slides, and have them for your reference. Tom says, record it, we're doing it. For potential projects for reallocation later this fall, can projects that are under construction now be considered? So Brian, this is to be determined. Right now, we are not likely to fund new projects that haven't already received ARPA funding and gone through the process. However, if there are substantial amount of money that ends up coming back and we do not have enough projects to reallocate it to, I'm sure new projects will be considered. It's just that's a to be determined. If I had a crystal ball, I could answer that question. Unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball.
And just as Erica and Beth stated before, section 341 of our budget bill, it says that it's as of the governor's authorization. So it would need to go through a fully vetted process to be able to be reallocated dollars towards that project, and that is up to the governor's purview.
Austin asked, when you say under contract, do you mean contract or muni? I would with the contractor or muni. The municipality, if they were awarded the funds, they need to have a contract with their design engineers as well as a construction contract executed. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, specifically related to construction managers at risk. Dawn, what if we are still awaiting DEQ approval? Can we continue with construction contracts? This is a question that I am going to have to look into. This has always been a standard requirement of any construction project that has to get DEQ permits. All engineers, from what I have been told, should know that it takes up to 60 days to get those permits. So that is part of the timing and the planning for getting your contracts in place. I do not know if we can allow this in the sense that your contracts that you signed, your grant agreements with the state that you executed, states that you will have all permits in place prior to going forward. So this is a question that I will be digging into further and will be providing some additional guidance related to. Brian Edwards, on a CMAR contract, if the guaranteed maximum price amendment and base agreement is in place, is that sufficient? Or do we need to have some contractor agreements in place as well? I'm going to address that in just a few minutes, but the short answer is you need to have the subcontractor agreements in place as well. What we need to know is, while you already have the construction manager at risk and a guaranteed maximum price, what we need to know is that there's workers and contractors out there that are willing to do the work to meet those to meet the guaranteed maximum price. So you will need those additional subcontractor agreements in place to prove that those funds have been encumbered. Misty, is there opportunity to apply for additional funding beyond what has already been awarded to obligate excess before return January 2025? As I stated before, we're not likely to fund new projects. The vetting process is cumbersome. It takes several agencies and several different processes to go through. But time will tell. This is another, if I had a crystal ball, I could answer this for you. Brianne, could you post the web address again where we can see the status? I'm guessing the status of the funding that is located on the state budget department's website.
It is svb.wyo.gov. If you Google search the Wyoming State Budget Department, it is located on our homepage.
Susan, will the process look like? What will the process look like to request the additional funds? Right now, there is no process because we're, like I said, providing funds to new projects is likely not going to happen. The additional funds, the reallocation of funds, we'll talk about that, and hopefully this will answer some of those questions. What happens if our project being advertised for bid now, but doesn't get awarded for any particular reason? What happens to the funds? This is from Alan. Unfortunately, if you're not able to award your bids, those funds will be reverted and reallocated because you will not be able to meet the October 1 date to have the funds encumbered as required by the rules. Marilyn Conley, so our ambulance building must be under contract with a construction company by October 1. That is correct, Marilyn. Paul, who do we contact to receive verification that our project encumbrance is approved? We have sent the contracts to SLIB several times and still are receiving emails that our projects are not encumbered. Paul, I'm not sure why, if you've sent both your engineering and construction contracts to us, why you would still be getting that. I will look into that. If you have a, if you could put in the chat what your entity is, I can look into that. Some of it has to do with if you are an HHS awardee and you received inflationary costs, that could be part of why you're still receiving these requests. We'll look into it and we'll figure that out for you. Staten, due to the timeline to get under contract, we are looking at a lease to buy option on land. The building is going out for RFP in September. Would this be allowed to proceed, or does the land have to be purchased? I believe you've submitted this question to me via email, and this is a question that I plan on taking to the work group when we meet tomorrow to discuss this and to discuss this question with the AG, so I will get back to you. Colette, if an ARPA project was approved, but only partially funded, and is currently under construction with completion dates on schedule, is it eligible to have funding added to the project? Have funding added to fund the project entirely? Is there any avenue for that request to be made? Currently there is not. This, we will likely, it would be very difficult for us to go back and figure out, okay, we need to fund this project to this max amount, and then we need to go back and do our reallocation. So I don't see that happening, but I will not say never.
At this time, there is no opportunity that is available or that has been identified of reallocating money to construction projects that need additional money. There is no avenue for that at this time.
Susan Scarletta, is there a specific contact to help with actually getting us the funds that we have been granted? Well, Susan, when you received your executed grant agreement, you should have received what we call a grant draft request form, a GDR form. In order to get your funds that you were awarded, you must complete that grant draft request form, GDR form, and submit it along with all the supporting invoices for the dollar amounts that you're requesting those funding. So if you have questions, send an email to the SLF _grantsandloans@wyo.gov email address, and we will have someone on my staff contact you. Dave Ingalls, I believe this is, we are currently working on a construction contract that is using ARPA funds. There is a possibility that we have approximately 100 to 200,000 left over, but won't know probably until around October 1st. How best to make sure that this additional amount can be redeployed here in the state? Dave will likely be reaching out to you and contacting you. If you're getting close to that date, I would appreciate you shooting me an email, letting me know this, and then I will be documenting this right now, so I know if I haven't heard from you to reach out to you and ask about it. All right. Susan Scarlett.
This is the same.
Scarletta, I'm more concerned with funds we have already been granted and not being able to get them. Susan, I think I just talked about that. Okay, Rock Springs, you're saying you've submitted your contracts?
Yeah, that was the guy who said that he was submitting stuff for the select board.
okay.
Mhm.
Who is this? Matt? When a combination of funding sources are utilized, can the ARPA money be spent first? Remaining project obligated after October 1? Unfortunately, you need to show all your ARPA funds are obligated. However, we also need to see that the whole project is obligated and is going to be complete. So Matt, you will likely need to send an email to the SLF email address and give more specific detail about that. However, we would prefer that ARPA funds are used and spent first at 100% so that these funds can be spent and sent out, and Christine and her people have less to report on, and my staff have less grants to track. So
I think one of the other things is that if it is a combination of funds and you have already previously provided executed contracts to the Office of State Lands and Investments, spend those ARPA dollars first. Get them out the door. They are probably the most high risk dollars that you need to spend immediately.
Anna is asking to provide updated information, etc. Do we send to the SLIB email address with our project number? Yes, please. Any correspondence, any emails sent to our office, please include your grant number in the subject line, because it makes it much easier for us to go back and look at these emails and to figure out which grant you're speaking of, because many entities have several grants. Lisa, for clarity, are you saying that current ARPA grantees would need to submit a funding request for a new project in order to receive redeployment funds? So new entities are unlikely recipients. Is there anything a new potential ARPA grantee can do to become eligible proactively? Unfortunately, not at this time. Like I said, the process to determine projects to be eligible for ARPA funding are very, it's a long process, it's tedious, and given that we will likely have about 2 months to figure out how to redeploy funds, funding new projects, vetting new projects is going to be very difficult. Frank Strong, for clarification, projects with water development funding that was converted to ARPA funding have the October 1st obligation. They do. We are going to have to be working with those grants just because that situation is different. So we will be working with each of those grantees individually. Marilyn, I'm having the HHS number grant form to draw down costs first and then MRGs as the match. Is that correct? That is correct. All right, so those were all the written questions. Alex, you are up. Is it Pfizer? Buzz?
Can you see if you can unmute? Maybe you can, oh, no.
Question was answered.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right, so we will.
I think we got another one.
Can current approved grants be eligible for redeployment funds?
We have, this is a decision that is for the governor, but we can take this to our work group and ask.
Yep. So I'm gonna go back and keep presenting, so construction managers at risk. If you have an executed contract for a construction manager at risk, a CMAR, you will also need to have the maximum guaranteed price and fully executed contracts with your contractor subcontractors. The purpose of this is to make sure that those, while you have this price, when you go out to bid, you may not get any bids. And so if we took your CMAR as we've got our funds encumbered, and then you went out to bid and you got no bidders. And that was the same process until 2026, those funds would end up going back to the treasury anyways. So the purpose of this is to ensure, just like with every other grant, that not only are the funds encumbered by the state by December, but that they can also be spent by the end of 2026. And we do not have time to reallocate funds after the end of 2024. So that is how construction manager at risk will be handled. We just need to make sure that these funds are going to be spent. The projects that have been partially funded or funded with ARPA funds are going to be completed, and we don't have a bunch of partially completed projects or things like that. In order to prove that your awarded funds are obligated, we must have copies of your executed contracts. That would be your engineering contracts, your construction contracts, those type of things to show that the dollar amount that you have been awarded or more than that, if you have matching funds in it, are obligated, and you have contractors in place to finish the work before the end of 2026. I will say, prior to us taking any funding back, we will be reaching out to each and every grant that will impact and have a conversation. We'll be letting you know, this is the amount that we've identified that can be reverted. This is what we intend on doing. This is the date it reverts. That will happen quickly right after the beginning of October, unless you're one of those entities that's reached out to us and asked for a week or two of additional time. So redeployment. The primary purpose of the ARPA funds, one of the 4 primary purposes, is to fund water and sewer related projects that that comply with SRF project eligibility. Therefore, the focus of the redeployment of funds will be to water and sewer projects that were funded through the water and sewer program, as well as the local government program administered by SLIP. Given the risky nature of the Health and Human Services program and those projects, it is unlikely additional funding will be allocated to those projects through the redeployment process. I believe there has been $52 or $53 million set aside for projects that have been identified as risky, in case we have to pay those funds back. So once October 1 comes and goes, and we've done all of our evaluation and we've looked at what projects met the threshold, which ones are moving forward and which ones are not, and the pot of money that we have to deal with, we're going to look at redeploying funds. For water and sewer projects, and really for any projects, funding inflationary costs are technically not a eligible expense, just in the nature of it. So determining what are inflationary costs versus what is just bad planning, bad numbers when you did your original estimate, is very difficult to do. So rather than doing that, what will happen is the funds will be redeployed on a pro rata basis. So once we have our universe of these are the projects that met that threshold of October 1 and have their funds encumbered, we're going to total all your matching funds up, specifically your funds that are from your cash, your reserves, your enterprise accounts, those funds that are yours. We will not be replacing your ARPA funds because you, as a community, specifically, this is to the municipalities. If you've pledged your ARPA funds to this project and you have reported such to the US Treasury, you will want to keep those funds in that project because you have the same obligation due date of December 31st, 2024 to have all of your direct ARPA funds obligated, just like the state does. So please, please, please keep that in mind. And so what we're gonna do is a pro rata approach. So as you can see on the screen, I just did a quick and dirty, say we have $100 available to redeploy. And we've got, what, 6 different projects that make up, their match funding is $139 million. And so you see the next column of their match funding, Town A, their $15 is 11% of the $139 of the total match funding between all those projects. So then when we would go to reallocate or redeploy the $100 of unencumbered funds, Town A would get 11% of those. City B would get 14%. Special District C would get 25%. And it would be based on the amount of funding or match funding that you put into your project initially. Reasons thinking behind this is through our ranking process, you received extra points for more match funding. And this seems like this is the most equitable, most fair approach to doing this, rather than picking just one or two winners or losers. This way, everyone who's met that threshold, that deadline of October 1 that was discussed in every funding meeting, everyone gets to benefit from some additional funding. These funds can then be used to pay for cost increases, inflationary costs, or if you've been able to complete your project with the funds you have and your matching funds, then you can take your matching funds and use them for a different project. How this will work is we will execute a new grant agreement with entities for the additional amount that is awarded to you. The reason being is these funds are being appropriated to entities under the Section 341 guidance. So through the governor's office, whereas your prior funding was awarded to you through SLIB under those legislative established programs. So what it'll look like is we're gonna fast and furious figure out these dollar amounts. And then we gotta hurry up and process all the grant agreements for this. And then we're going to be sending them out to you via email, and we will ask you to expeditiously sign them and return them, so that then we can get them signed by the governor's office so that they are considered fully executed before the end of December 2024. If after all of this is done and there's still money remaining, we will be looking at some large projects and potentially awarding additional funding to those projects. Maybe looking, and this is where it's a big maybe, no processes in place, no application process will happen, but maybe there will be new projects that are funded that are already under contract and under construction. But this right here, this won't be decided until November, maybe even December. And so that's what makes funding new projects very difficult for us, is we don't know what we're gonna have to play with. I mean, the pot of money, we could be left with what we have now, and everyone gets their projects and their funding encumbered and under contract. Or we may have $100 million. Who knows? And $100 million may be difficult to redistribute the pro rata approach, because then we're going to be paying you more money than what the project costs.
It is also worth noting that the ARPA funds are for public health response and negative economic impacts due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic is over, which means that we have very limited uses on where we can redeploy dollars. Water, sewer, infrastructure projects are a highly eligible item. But the problem with that is that we can't redeploy a massive amount of water, sewer, infrastructure dollars in our state. We have limited number of engineering firms. We have limited number of contractors. We have limited number of prioritized local hire workers. And when we start exceeding a project cost for ARPA dollars in the amount of $10 million, there are additional requirements that are required by the US Treasury for reporting. One of them is the Davis-Bacon Act. Another one is BABA as well. So that we need to make sure, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm thinking of a different program. Excuse me. Thank you, Beth, for correcting me. But it is very hard for people to go back and make sure that they meet those criteria when the project is maybe 75% of the way completed and they received more ARPA dollars. So please keep that in mind, and these dollars are supposed to be used to make a long-term benefit for our state. And if we are pushing the risk level, we would rather send them back to the Treasury than put them into a high-risk project and have to repay them whenever the Office of the Inspector General of the United States Treasury comes and does a financial and programmatic audit on the state of Wyoming.
So what Christine said, she knows it, she lives it every day. She breathes it, probably sleeps it.
Yes.
So that's kind of the end of our presentation. Once again, I'll take as many questions as you guys have for me. I will stay here and follow questions. Like I said, for as much as I possibly can. So keep sending them and I will keep answering them. So I'm trying to find. So. Let me find. Okay, I'm trying.
I think that we got that one.
one.
We got that one. I think that this is the new one.
So Tim, so you want to see all subcontractor and supplier contracts. For the majority of it, of the funds that have been sent to you, especially the ARPA fund amount, that is what we would like to see, yes. Are you looking for all subcontractors, including paint, finish work, or just major subs like mechanical and plumbing? We just need to have, we just need to know that the project, all of the ARPA funds are under contract. So if you need to provide the painters and the finishing work contracts to show that, then that's what you will need to provide. Tony, how do grantees obligate project funds that are never contracted but were approved in grant applications, permitting, easement, required advertising? Tony, as you and I have talked about this, these are things that when we go around and talk to entities about funds that are available to be relinquished, these are things that if they have additional costs that they have, these are things we'll need to discuss with them. However, this is going to be a case-by-case basis, and we're gonna have to see what each individual project is able to provide. Frank, for water or WWDC ARPA money requirements, contact your WWDC project manager. Brian, you mentioned the October 1st and October 31st date. If we are in the process of getting subcontractor agreements in place on a CMAR, if we let you know if it takes another week or two to get them signed, will you work with us? We are going to be down to the wire. And these are the situations where, yes, Brian, we will be able to work with you. We just need to know, we need to be able to have the assurance that those funds are going to be spent. Kiltree, what do you mean by assurances that subs are under contract? Do you want those contracts or an affidavit? Preferably contracts, because that's the way, we have established this. And that's really the way that we feel is the best way to determine if the funds are under contract is we've got to see executed contracts. Tom, we just bid a backup well and treatment train. It is tied to a WWDC. It's tied to WWDC funding and ARPA funds, but the project bid 900,000 over engineers' estimates. Is there any hope for us as to getting any funding to help make up the difference? At this point in time, sir, I can't answer that. That's after November discussion, see how much money we have. But if I had to give you an answer today, it would be no. However, things change. Lisa, thank you so much for your acknowledgement of the hard work of my staff and everyone that is working on this. We really have put some blood, sweat, and tears in it, and we are dedicated to making this the best for everyone. However, unfortunately, there's deadlines and requirements that have to be met. Lisa, can you remind us how much ARPA funding Wyoming was granted by the feds and how many grants were funded?
So the award amount for ARPA to the state of Wyoming was $1.068 billion. And we have about 1.065 billion, I believe, adopted right now. Beth, I think that there were around 200-ish so projects or grant awards, yeah, that were funded through the State Loan and Investment Board.
Yeah, so between, I want to say there was like 60 some HHS projects funded and over 100, I want to say, water projects funded through the program. Over $200 million went out, which is a lot. We didn't get any extra staff, and through this whole process, I've had changeover in staff. So I know the process has been cumbersome. It's been slow to get your money, but my staff is working extremely hard. And it's just, we've got to make sure that at the end of the day, the state's not on the hook to pay any of these funds back.
And I do apologize. I'm going to walk back. We have 1.055 billion accounted for and adopted right now. And I apologize my misinformation on this. 1.065 billion.
So Brian, realizing that ARPA funded projects do not require Davis-Bacon compliant, is it correct that we still need to follow state prevailing wage requirements? That is something you as a community will have to talk with your AG. I do believe that you will have to comply with those, or talk to your attorneys and make sure that you're in compliance with the requirements. Davis-Bacon is required on any project that has over $10 million in ARPA funds in it. So, but I think those projects that are less than 10 million do have to follow the state prevailing wage requirements.
You are correct, Beth, and it is also worth noting that the Treasury really likes to see that whenever you are completing or constructing these projects, you are also using prioritized local hires, which would be subject to the prevailing wage in the state of Wyoming.
Tracy, why are HHS projects determined to be a risk if the AG has already approved our projects? So, as Christine said earlier, the pandemic, COVID, the war against COVID, whatever you want to call it, it's over. And so HHS projects were very difficult for us to fund at the get-go because they had to identify a harm or a situation that was caused or exacerbated by COVID-19. And then your project had to have a direct relation to addressing that issue, as well as that you had to provide two other alternatives to the project that you decided to go forward with that shows that the project that you chose to fund was the best and most appropriate and the most in line with what the harm you had identified. And so with HHS projects, when we went through that whole process, if you'll remember, it took us 3 board meetings to get to a point where we could finally consider HHS applications. The reason being is the majority of those applications that we received had to be amended to just address things that were eligible for HHS projects. Therefore, for us to go back and put funding into HHS projects, we would have to go back and do the same kind of evaluation to determine if the funding that was being put into HHS projects was appropriate and in compliance with ARPA rules. If you will remember, during the 2023 legislative session, $15 million was appropriated to the HHS program for inflationary costs. We only received just over $13 million in requests for those inflationary funds. So that could have been a way to get additional funds for a project. However, with HHS at this point, given the time constraint that we're under and the risk associated with those projects, given the requirements of the ARPA programs, that is why they're deemed risky and why they're not high on the list to be funded by the redeployment funds.
And also it's worth noting that when we reviewed those HHS projects and the AG also reviewed them, that was in 2022. And COVID was still happening during that time. So the risk that was posed to us during that time in approving those projects was much less than what it is right now if we were to fund HHS projects.
Joy, just to confirm, no hospital projects will be eligible for any redeployment funds on existing projects. As of today, that is my understanding. That is correct. Austin, thanks for the webinar. One last time, do ARPA funded projects that need additional funding need a new application for the redeployment funds? Austin, we will not be accepting applications for additional funding at this time or probably ever. So your ability to get additional funds for ARPA approved projects will be through the redeployment process. That way you will get additional ARPA funds and then you can use your match funding for the increased cost if necessary. Dave Ingalls, we have a second ARPA project that was recently awarded a contract for construction. We were not able to award all bid packages because we would not have been able to fund them. The bid package is designed. How do you have any idea when you will know if it would be possible to obtain some of the redeployment funds to complete the unfunded bid package? Those funds, they will not be available until the October 1 date has passed. We need to know what we have in the pot, which we cannot determine until after October 1. And so really, as I just said, the ability to get additional funding for projects will come through that redeployment process, but that will not happen until end of October, beginning of November. So if those projects didn't receive bids, we may not be able to provide them additional funding because they won't meet that threshold that is established or the deadline that has been established. Dave, I would recommend that you reach out to send an email to the SLF web or email address and kind of explain what grant you're talking about and what the situation is. So then maybe I can take that to the work group and we can discuss it. Lisa, thank you for your appreciation. We appreciate you. Thank you, Kelly, for once again for your appreciation. Robin, given that our grant is based on a 50% match and construction is not due for completion until December 2026, we have planned to design this year and construct next year. We are using a design build contract with the contractor so those subs will be in place. Does this not meet the subcontractor requirement you have referenced earlier? Robin, if you could please send an email to the SLF email address and give us some more specifics and let us know what grant you're talking about, we can reach out to you and talk to you about that. Jeff, where is the definition of encumbered coming from? Could a solution be that you reinterpret that definition to mean that there is a contract for the project with the entity? Getting those contracts in place takes a fair amount of time out of everyone's schedule. Jeff, unfortunately, no, we cannot reinterpret that definition. That definition has, well, it's not a definition, it is our interpretation. And that October 1 date was in SLIB rules. It was discussed at the time that grant funds were awarded. And that date has been discussed every time that ARPA funds have been discussed. So we can't change that. The purpose of this, like I said, is to ensure not only that the state has the funds encumbered by the end of the 2014 calendar year, but also to ensure that there are construction or contractors, workers, and engineers to do the work between 2024 and 2026. If we do not have the assurances before the end of this calendar year, and it comes to fruition that those projects can't be done, those funds will be relinquished to the US Treasury. They won't be eligible for redeployment. We can't use them for a different project that your community may have. So unfortunately, we are where we're at with that encumbered date and that encumbered interpretation. Jeff, would a shovel-ready project that has already been designed and received DEQ approval has already been vetted through the first 2 rounds of ARPA applications be a project that may be considered for redeployment funds? To be determined, as with anything with redeployment funds, to be determined. Marilyn, thank you so much. I'm glad you found this helpful. Teresa, I'm glad you've also found it helpful. And Marilyn, reach out anytime you have questions, send us emails. We'll get to you as soon as we can. Just understand that my staff is processing hundreds more additional pay requests every month than they historically do related to all the ARPA grants that we have awarded. In addition, they're still doing their regular jobs, which requires time. So please be patient with my staff. Please understand that we are working the very best and the very hardest we can to get your funds, your pay requests reviewed and funds dispersed to you in a timely fashion. If I don't have any other questions, we can end this. But I'm here if anyone else has anything else they want to ask.
And it is worth noting that we will consider having another one of these closer to the October 1 obligation date. So if your question was not answered today, we have it on record, and we will make sure that we try to get you an answer as soon as possible.
Absolutely. And like I said, to those of you who ask questions and I asked you to send me an email, if you get those sent, I will get my staff working on getting answers to you as soon as possible.
Thank you everyone for your time.
Thanks, guys. Hopefully you have a good day. Hopefully you feel a little more informed with the ARPA process.